You didn't lose her because you stepped away. You lost her the moment she felt smaller in your eyes. That's the wound most men carry without language for it. You believed distance scares women. You believed leaving is the ultimate threat. So when things felt unstable, you did what you were taught to do. You leaned in. You gave more attention, more reassurance, more presence. And instead of pulling her closer, you felt something slip. Her tone changed. Her warmth faded. And suddenly, the more you showed up, the less she seemed to care. That confusion cuts deep because it attacks your sense of reality. You weren't careless. You weren't cruel. You didn't withdraw. You did everything that was supposed to make her feel safe, and somehow, that's when her behavior shifted. Here's the truth no one tells you. Women don't panic when you're gone. They panic when your perception of them changes. She doesn't fear losing access to you. She fears losing her position inside your eyes. The moment she senses that your attention no longer reflects her value, the same way, that's when something in her tightens. That's when she pulls back, tests, provokes, repositions. This is why chasing makes things worse. Not because you're weak, but because chasing quietly tells her that her value no longer needs to be earned. It's already secured. And once value feels secure, it stops being protected. Women don't fear your absence. They fear your disengaged eyes. This video isn't about holding on to her. It's about understanding the deeper fear driving her behavior, the one most men never see until it's already cost them everything. Men instinctively think about value as possession, access, commitment, presence. If she's still there, if she hasn't left, if the relationship label still exists, they assume value is intact. That's why men fear loss. Losing her feels like losing something tangible. Women experience value differently. It's relational, not possessional. It doesn't live in ownership or commitment. It lives in reflection, in how they are seen, in how they exist inside your perception. And the moment that reflection weakens, value feels threatened, even if nothing external has changed. This is why the male and female fears never line up. Men fear losing access. Women fear losing mirroring. She doesn't measure her value by whether she has you. She measures it by how she feels inside your attention. Does your gaze still register her? Does your presence still reflect desire, curiosity, gravity? Or has she become familiar, predictable, background noise? That's why her reactions seem irrational to men. She doesn't react when commitment is threatened. She doesn't collapse when you're busy. She doesn't panic when you create space. Those things don't immediately change how she's being seen. But the moment your attention shifts, when your energy flattens, when your eyes no longer linger, when your perception subtly disengages something inside her alarms. Because value, to her nervous system, just took a hit. This is where men get it wrong. They think reassurance will stabilize things. They think committing harder will calm the situation. But commitment doesn't restore mirroring. Presence doesn't automatically restore perception. You can stay and still be unseen. Real life shows this over and over. She reacts sharply when you grow emotionally indifferent, not when you grow distant. She tests when your focus moves elsewhere, not when you assert independence. Because the threat she's responding to isn't abandonment, it's devaluation. Losing you hurts less than being unseen by you. Once you understand this, you stop misreading her behavior as fear of loss. You realize it's fear of disappearing inside your eyes. And that realization changes everything, because it shifts your attention from managing commitment to understanding perception, where female value actually lives. This is the foundation. Everything that follows her tests, her distance, her reactions grows out of this single psychological truth. When value feels threatened, behavior changes not because she wants distance, but because she needs information. This is the second truth most men misread. What looks like emotional instability is often a defensive scan. A check, a test designed to answer one question. Do I still matter in his eyes? This is where perception control enters. When a woman senses that her value is slipping inside your perception, she doesn't ask directly. She acts. She changes tone. She introduces friction, because behavior reveals information faster than words ever could. Sudden emotional tests appear. She challenges you over small things, pushes boundaries that were never an issue before, not to start conflict, but to see if she still moves you. Movement equals relevance. Indifference equals danger. Provoking jealousy follows the same logic. Mentioning other attention, referencing being wanted elsewhere. This isn't about replacing you. It's about checking whether your perception still reacts. Whether your eyes still register loss. Whether she still has weight inside your internal world. Withholding warmth is another signal. Less affection, less emotional availability, less softness. Men experience this as rejection. In reality, it's a mirror turned back toward you. She's watching to see if you lean in, react, notice, or if the distance goes unanswered. Creating distance is the final layer. Space isn't always escape. Often, it's calibration. She pulls back to see if her absence creates gravity. If you feel it. If her value is still intact without constant proximity. This is where men collapse the dynamic. They assume she's leaving. They chase. They reassure. They explain commitment. And in doing so, they answer the test incorrectly, not because they cared, but because they misunderstood the question. She wasn't asking. Will you stay? He was asking. Do I still matter? Distance isn't rejection. It's a value probe. Once you see this, her behavior stops looking chaotic. It becomes diagnostic. Every test, every withdrawal, every shift is information seeking, not abandonment seeking. And the man who understands that stops reacting emotionally and starts observing calmly. Because when you don't panic at distance, when your perception stays steady, something changes. The test resolves, not through reassurance, but through stability. The paradox men feel starts. Here, the more you move toward her to stabilize things, the more unstable she becomes. This isn't because she dislikes care. It's because over-pursuit quietly distorts her self-image. And most men never see this connection. When you chase, you're not just expressing desire. You're communicating hierarchy. Need communicates elevation. If you need her attention, her reassurance, her validation to feel settled, she begins to feel larger than you in the dynamic, not more valuable, heavier. And that weight is uncomfortable. At first, this feels good to her. Attention reassures value. Your pursuit confirms importance. But quickly, something else kicks in. If you are smaller and she is larger, polarity collapses. Attraction depends on balance, not worship. When that balance tips, her nervous system doesn't relax, it tightens. Here's the part men misunderstand. Her fear increases when you chase. Not fear of losing you, fear of becoming something she doesn't respect. Being placed on a pedestal doesn't feel empowering. It feels unstable. It creates pressure to perform value instead of embody it. This is why reassurance backfires. You tell her she matters. You tell her you're not going anywhere. You double down on availability. And instead of settling, she becomes restless, irritable, distant. Not because she wants less, but because the dynamic no longer feels grounded. Every extra explanation, every emotional reach, every attempt to fix her uncertainty amplifies this effect. You are trying to lower her fear. But what you're actually doing is signaling that her perception controls your center. And once she feels that, something inside her self-image fractures. She doesn't think, he's weak. She feels, I'm too important here. That feeling isn't flattering. It's destabilizing. And when a woman's self-image destabilizes, attraction doesn't grow, it dissolves. Not because she lost interest in you, but because she lost coherence in herself. This is why chasing never produces the result men expect. It doesn't secure connection. It erodes structure. It shifts the dynamic from mutual reflection to imbalance. And here's the hardest truth to accept when you chase her approval. She doesn't just lose respect for you. She starts losing respect for herself. That's the real paradox. The very behavior meant to protect the connection quietly damages the internal conditions attraction needs to survive. What men call tests are rarely about commitment. They aren't loyalty checks. They aren't traps designed to see if you'll stay. They are perception checks, quiet, instinctive attempts to answer a single internal question. Do I still affect you the way I used to? When a woman senses a shift in how she's seen, her nervous system doesn't ask for promises. It asks for feedback. Not verbal feedback, emotional feedback. This is where men misread the situation completely. They hear distance and assume she's questioning the relationship. In reality, she's questioning her position inside your perception. Every emotional test is a probe. When she becomes colder, when she withholds warmth, when she creates tension or contradiction, she isn't asking. Will you stay? He's asking. If I pull back, do I still move you? The response she's watching for isn't reassurance. It's impact. This is why overreacting fails. When you chase clarity, over-explain, or rush to stabilize, you answer the wrong question. You confirm availability, not value. You show that her withdrawal controls your emotional center. And paradoxically, that tells her she doesn't need to test anymore because the answer is already clear. Men think passing a test means proving loyalty, but loyalty is irrelevant here. Commitment doesn't regulate her internal value. Perception does. She needs to know that her presence still changes the emotional atmosphere, not that you'll endure anything to keep her. Notice how these tests escalate when men become predictable. When your reactions are guaranteed, there's nothing left to measure. So she creates friction, not to cause drama, but to restore feedback. Tension becomes the measuring tool. And here's the critical distinction if you stay grounded, if you don't rush to repair. If your emotional posture remains steady, the test resolves itself. Not because you won, but because the answer arrived without words. She still affects you, but she doesn't control you. That balance is what settles her. Not reassurance, not pursuit. Presence with limits. This is why tests disappear around men who don't personalize them. Those men don't pass tests by responding correctly. They dissolve them by not collapsing under them. Their center stays intact regardless of fluctuation. So understand this clearly. She's not asking if you'll stay no matter what. She's asking where she stands in your internal hierarchy. She's not measuring commitment. She's measuring value. The 10 men who trigger this fear most are rarely the loudest, the most expressive, or the most reassuring. They are the ones whose emotional center doesn't move easily. Their presence feels solid, not reactive. Their attention isn't scattered or begging to be received. And because of that, it carries weight. An emotionally grounded man doesn't rush to correct fluctuations. When her mood shifts, he doesn't scramble to stabilize it. When her warmth pulls back, he doesn't chase it down with questions or reassurance. This isn't indifference, it's containment. His internal state isn't outsourced to her reactions, and that creates a subtle imbalance she can feel immediately. Non-reactivity is often misunderstood as distance, but psychologically, it registers as scarcity. Not artificial scarcity, perceptual scarcity. His approval isn't guaranteed. His attention isn't automatic. And because it's not freely given, it becomes something that can be lost. That's where the fear begins. Calm under fluctuation is the key trait here. When she tests, withdraws, provokes, or shifts tone, most men reveal how much they need stability by trying to force it back. The grounded man does the opposite. He stays where he is. He doesn't punish. He doesn't pursue. He simply continues. And in that steadiness, a mirror forms one she can't control. This is why reassurance-chasing men rarely trigger this fear. Their validation is predictable. Their perception is always available. There's nothing at stake in losing it because it never leaves. But with a man who doesn't need her validation, perception becomes conditional, not as a tactic, but as a natural result of self-containment. Her fear isn't about losing him physically. It's about losing access to how she's seen through his eyes, his calm gaze, his measured attention, his unhurried presence. These become reflective surfaces. And once she realizes that her value feels clearer, sharper, more alive inside that reflection, the idea of losing it becomes unsettling. This is where behavior shifts. Tests appear. Distance emerges, not to push him away, but to check whether the mirror still holds, whether his perception still carries weight, whether she still matters in the same way. A man like this doesn't assert value verbally. He embodies it structurally. His life has direction. His emotional state has borders. And because he doesn't collapse into approval seeking, his attention becomes something that can't be replaced easily. That is the fear, not abandonment, replacement. Because when a woman realizes that a man's validation isn't guaranteed and that his perception has mass, she becomes aware of what could be lost. A man who doesn't need her validation becomes the mirror she fears losing. When men sense this fear, their instinct is to neutralize it. They explain attraction. They reassure verbally. They increase availability. They try to prove that nothing is at risk. And without realizing it, they amplify the very fear they're trying to calm. The first mistake is explaining attraction. When you verbalize how much you like her, why you chose her, or how important she is to you. You turn perception into information. What once had weight becomes data. Mystery collapses into certainty. And certainty, while comforting, removes the very tension that made your attention valuable in the first place. The second mistake is verbal reassurance. Telling her you're special, you matter, or you don't need to worry feels kind, but psychologically, it cheapens the signal. Reassurance given freely loses impact quickly. It tells her your perception is stable regardless of her position, behavior, or presence. And once validation becomes unconditional, it stops functioning as a mirror. There's nothing left to protect. Emotional over-availability compounds this further. When you make yourself constantly accessible, always ready to talk, always ready to soothe, always ready to respond, you remove friction entirely. Polarity collapses. Your emotional center moves closer to hers instead of remaining its own point of gravity. And when that happens, her fear doesn't dissolve, it transforms into restlessness. Seeking confirmation is the final accelerant. Questions like, "Are we okay?" or "Do you still feel the same?" feel reasonable, but they invert the dynamic. You're no longer holding perception, you're asking for it back. That shift signals dependency, not presence. And dependency doesn't stabilize value, it destabilizes it. Here's the paradox: men's struggle with fear isn't calmed by proof, it's calmed by structure. When you stay centered, emotionally contained, unhurried, and self-directed, her nervous system regulates itself. She doesn't need to test. She doesn't need to provoke. The mirror remains intact without words. Remaining centered doesn't mean withdrawing or becoming cold. It means not rushing to manage her internal state. It means allowing emotional waves to pass without narrating them. It means trusting that your presence doesn't require constant explanation to remain felt. When you explain, you flatten the signal. When you reassure, you dilute it. When you overextend, you dissolve it. But when you stay where you are calm, grounded, and unreactive, her fear loses momentum, not because you argued it away, but because nothing in you collapsed under it. You don't calm her fear by explaining. You calm it by remaining centered. Applying this truth ethically begins with a simple internal correction. Stop trying to manage how you're perceived, and start respecting that perception can only form when it isn't pressured. Manipulation is about forcing an outcome. Grounded application is about removing interference. The difference is subtle, but everything changes there. The first principle is letting perception breathe. When you rush to define how she should see you, you suffocate the process that creates value. Attraction and respect are not built through clarification. They emerge through observation over time. When you allow space, emotional, conversational, psychological, her nervous system does the work on its own. She arrives at conclusions instead of being led to them. The second principle is refusing to negotiate value. Value loses power the moment it's defended. Explaining why you matter, why you're different, or why she shouldn't doubt you turns value into an argument. And anything that can be argued can be discounted. Grounded men don't debate their position. They live in a way that makes their position evident. The absence of negotiation is what signals solidity. Staying internally anchored is the core discipline here. This means your emotional state isn't waiting on her reactions for confirmation. You don't rise when she approves or shrink when she pulls back. Your direction remains intact regardless of fluctuation. This is not emotional withdrawal, it's emotional ownership. You're present without being porous. Practically, this looks like reducing emotional narration. You don't explain every feeling. You don't label every dynamic. You don't rush to process every shift in real time. Silence becomes intentional, not avoidant. You speak when there's substance, not when there's anxiety. Maintaining direction regardless of reaction is critical. Your life continues moving forward. Your priorities stay active. Your rhythm doesn't stall because her mood changes. This isn't punishment, it's orientation. And orientation is felt more strongly than reassurance ever could be. Finally, let actions speak quietly. Loud signals invite skepticism. Quiet consistency builds trust. When your behavior aligns over time without commentary, perception stabilizes on its own. She doesn't fear losing value because nothing in you is scrambling to hold it. This is the ethical core you're not withholding to provoke. And you're not performing to impress. You're simply allowing reality to be seen without distortion. Because value isn't asserted, it's observed. At the deepest level, what she is protecting has nothing to do with keeping you close. It has everything to do with preserving the version of herself that exists in your presence. This is the part most men never see, and once you see it, the entire dynamic reorders itself. A woman doesn't anchor her sense of value to possession. She anchors it to reflection. Who she is around you matters more than whether you stay. How she feels seen, oriented, and calibrated in your presence becomes part of her identity. And when that reflection sharpens her, when she feels more composed, more grounded, more alive, losing access to it feels destabilizing. This is why fear shows up not when you threaten to leave, but when your perception shifts, when your eyes disengage, when your attention loses charge, when your presence no longer mirrors her at the same depth. The threat isn't abandonment, it's invisibility. It's the quiet erosion of a self she recognizes and wants to keep. Men often misinterpret this and respond by trying harder to be chosen. They increase effort. They negotiate importance. They chase reassurance. But doing so moves them out of position. The moment you seek selection, you stop being a reference point, and references are what stabilize identity. The man who understands this makes a different move. He stops auditioning. He stops proving. He stops reacting to every fluctuation as a verdict on his worth. Instead, he becomes consistent internally. His values remain intact. His direction stays clear. His emotional posture doesn't bend to secure approval. This stability does something powerful. It gives her a fixed point, a mirror that doesn't distort itself to please, a presence that doesn't disappear when challenged. Around that kind of man, a woman doesn't fear losing the relationship, she fears losing access to that reflection, because it sharpens her sense of self instead of soothing it into dullness. This is the paradox men need to integrate. The less you try to be chosen, the more you are experienced as consequential. Not because you withdraw, but because you remain whole. You don't negotiate value. You don't demand recognition. You simply exist in a way that is internally aligned. When you become a stable reference point, fear loses its grip. Tests soften. Tension recalibrates. Not because you controlled the dynamic, but because you stopped feeding instability with reaction. Women don't fear abandonment. They fear invisibility. And the man who understands this never chases because his presence already carries weight.